Someone had to say it. Welcome back to Someone Had to Say It. On today's episode, we interviewed Barri Leiner. Barri is a grief specialist who took her own painful loss and turned it into an amazing healing workshops called The Memory Circle. Listen to her story of how she overcame her very own painful grief and is now helping countless others with theirs. To learn more about her workshops and her upcoming retreat in the Berkshires, please visit her website at thememorycircle.com. Thememorycircle.com. Thank you for listening. Welcome back, everyone, to Someone Had to Say It. We are back from a little hiatus, summer break, vacation, whatever you want to, holiday, whatever you want to call it. And we have a very interesting guest that we're very excited to interview. Please welcome Barri Leiner. Okay, see?
Barri Leiner Grant.
And Heidi, of course.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be back.
Yes, we took a little break for the summer just to kind of recoup and write for Heidi and just for me see my kids and travel a little bit. So all my travel involve my children. Stace, I'm sure that's for a lot of people.
What a good mom.
Yeah, too good. But we want to welcome Barri here and we want to talk about how we know her, what she does, and everything about her. So I met Barri through Heidi. I was grateful that she told me about you because I was going through my own grief with my dad, and she said, "You got to check out her Instagram. You've got to check out what Barri's doing." So basically, you are like a grief counselor,
a grief coach, a grief specialist, and educator. Yes.
Right. And in your own words, let's tell our viewers, listeners, a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Well, in 1993, I experienced my own loss. I lost my mother, Ellen, and she died suddenly. And in 1993, I can assure you that the world wasn't saying much about grief or grieving. I owned my own public relations firm at the time and worked in the fashion industry. And it was a very quick kind of a right back to work. It was like the idea back then really was, let's get back to normal. Of course, I was grieving the most important person in my whole entire life. Everything had fallen out. The bottom had fallen out. My mom went to the beach one day and had an aneurysm in a beach chair and was gone the next day. Wow. It was traumatic. It was unthinkable. It was shocking. And yet, and I was in my 20s, and yet everybody just said, you'll be okay. You're strong like her. And if I've learned anything over this long arc of grief, nearly 30 years later, it is that I most definitely needed support back then. And when I knew I needed support was around the time that I had my first child. It was kind of this wake-up call where I thought, oh my goodness, now I'm going to be a motherless mother. I needed her more than ever in that moment. I had, of course, survived those years. Lots of people would tell you, you're strong, you're just like her. And so that messaging from the world felt like, okay, well, that seems to be what I'm getting a lot of, like, praise and pat on the back. This must be how you grieve. It must be just like getting back to some sense of normal. But what we all know is that when you come to a point in your life, there's sort of that before and after mark where everything changes. Everything. You change. There is no returning to normal. It's a whole new you, an identity shift. And along the way, I kept meeting other motherless daughters, and in very hushed conversations, we would exchange some of these feelings. I also read Hope Edelman's life-changing book, which was called Motherless Daughters, and I just realized in the pages of that book that I wasn't alone. that there were many of the women that she had interviewed, and herself, a woman who had lost her mom in her 20s, that we were feeling much of the same. And I thought, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. I'm like, this is so what what I should have had in the beginning. Like I had wished so much that I had had that kind of book, that kind of support. So very slowly, I started to share with others in just a peer guided way, where I would, let's say, at my local yoga studio, create a circle right before Mother's Day for other women who had lost their mothers. And people in whispers would say, do you think you could do that for, fill in the blank, for fathers, for Father's Day, for sibling loss, for child loss, like for whatever loss? And I'm just a girl who lost her mom. And I thought, this is such profound work. And when we were in circle, the thing I heard most often was, you helped me feel like I wasn't alone. I felt camaraderie. I felt like I wasn't crazy. I felt supported and seen and heard and understood. And I thought, I had been many things: a journalist, a television newscaster. I had done all of these jobs, but the way that I felt when I was in those circles led me to believe this is where you should be. This is really I always say, like, sort of like when you sit straight up like that in your purpose and you just know this is where I'm supposed to be, that's what it felt like. And so I felt like I needed more training. And so I always say now my trainings had trainings. I sat with a woman named Dora Carpenter and did her training, which was International Coaching Federation backed. Then training with Claire Bidwell Smith, who is also a leader in the field, who I work alongside with to this now on her retreats, co-facilitating her retreats. And David Kessler's first training as a grief educator, and then Hope Edelman's, which was really a full circle moment. And then to come to sit beside her and also co-facilitate one of her motherless daughters' retreats. So it was work that felt as if it was tapping me on the shoulder for a very, very long time, but it didn't really come to pass that I made a formal change from this sort of being a little bit of a
Right.
peer guided to my formal work in creating something called the Memory Circle, which was a place and space to sit shoulder to shoulder with others who experience loss of every and all kinds.
Wow, that is so special. That is so amazing. My own nieces and nephew lost their father when they were quite young. And so it's so important for kids. I mean, for everybody, it's like a universal need to know that you're not alone, that whatever emotions you're experiencing are normal. And I know with my book that's coming out in October, it features a main character who lost her mother.
Mm,
It started when she was 15, and then in her early 20s, she passed away. So a lot of what you're saying really resonates with me as a writer, and I think definitely with Julia, who has a very similar story actually with her father. If you want to share,
Yeah.
Julia.
Well, and I just want to mention for anyone listening that they can find more information on the memorycircle.com. I'll put it in the show notes because that was important. I went on there, I read everything that you do and about you. And yes, exactly like Heidi said, I keep thinking that these support groups are so needed in every aspect of your life. So not just for grief. And you and I, Barry, and you and I have spoken about other things, women's groups,
yeah.
perimenopause, whatever, postpartum. When I had my son 25, almost 26 years ago, and this was what, 99, I had horrible postpartum depression. It was something that I never experienced before, obviously. And I was only 23 when I had him. And at the time, there was nothing. There was no support groups. There was really nothing to help mothers going through that. And I just thought I was going crazy. I just thought, well, nobody else is dealing with this. You feel very isolated. You feel very
And
alone.
we suffer in silence because these are sort of these
Exactly.
taboo topics that I always tell people when they say, what do you write about? Because I've really leaned on my writing background to create what I call a genre called quick tell the others. Like whenever I've been through something that's been very difficult,
You have to.
to make sense of it, I wrote about it for
Right.
me, but then I learned the more I talked about it, the more I wrote about it, the more I
Mhm.
put it out there and realized how much more alike we are than different, how much more when we have these conversations, like you said, I don't think there is any normal, but I think there is some kind of I see you and you are not alone. I think it's often hard, even in our OB's office. I have always found that there are conversations that they should be educated about when we show up, and it is becoming more and more. But in our 20s, people
Mhm.
treat us like grown-ups, and I say, anytime you experience a loss, I think at any age, until
Mhm.
you are without a parent, it is not this invisible changing of the guard, if you will, that there is a part of you that then becomes an adult. So I
Mhm.
don't care at any age. If you're a woman who's lost your mom when you were 60, you've never been on earth without her. So these are all
Right. Exactly.
transitional. Yeah, and
Mhm.
you find your people when you start to tell your story, but you have to find safe spaces to do so.
Well, and that was what I was going to say is that especially in our country, in America, there is not a lot of support in terms of anything. It's starting to get better, but there's not a lot of that community, that
Mhm.
village. So whether you're going through grief, having a baby, sickness, whatever it is, people going through cancer, people going through any kind of illness, there's not a lot. Yes, you can find things now through the hospitals, but I've done all those groups. I've done grief support groups through the hospitals, through insurance, through a church, even through a synagogue. And depending who is running them, it could be very chaotic. It could be very people just going off on a tangent and nobody's stopping them, people talking forever and
Can
ever.
be
Like
harmful. Yeah.
when I went on to some that were virtual and there was like 35 people and everyone takes a turn and people talk forever. And it just, I thought I feel worse than when I first came here.
Mm.
So I guess which leads me to a question. You've been doing this for a while. And in my own grief, I keep thinking when I hear of other stories of people losing their parents, loved ones, whether it's sudden or long sickness. In my head, I was thinking, okay, well, I lost my dad super suddenly. We expected him to come right home, wasn't going to happen. Is that easier or harder than going through a long sickness? And I guess in my head, I don't think either one is easier or harder. What do you think? What have you seen with people that you've met?
Well, I've also experienced both. I had the sudden loss of my mom at age 27, and she was just 50. And just this past January, after 10 years of being my dad's caretaker alongside my siblings and living alongside his memory loss for a decade, he died. And we had hospice, and we were there when he was gone, and we got to say goodbye. And when people ask me that, what is the worst grief you sit with, or what is the worst grief? I always say yours.
Doesn't
Yours,
matter.
yours is the one you're reckoning with. Yours is the one that changes you forever. Yours is the one that sort of, like I said, changes the before and the after to something entirely new. Um, and we can feel this sense of isolation and loneliness. And when we meet someone who you've done it in a group, when we meet someone in the right supportive way with the right leadership, as you
Mm,
said, and in your bones, I always tell people you never have to stay somewhere where you don't feel, and only you get to decide where
That's
you feel that sense of safety, so that the vulnerability that you're feeling at this very tender time can, like I said, be seen, heard, witnessed, and suddenly I think it's this wisdom exchange. Somebody says something that you have felt and you suddenly feel less alone, or you're able to say something and you see the whole group nodding. It's profound. It's profound. Like you said, in any kind of loss, death and non-death loss, as caretakers, going through divorce, any big life change, or a change where what you imagined doesn't happen, doesn't come to fruition. So sometimes that can be just a life change, a job loss. And we do a lot of good. I always say there's no grief Olympics. We do a really good job of comparing our losses so that we're not certain whether we have permission to grieve a non-death loss as we would a death loss. We don't have permission whether it's tragic or the person was older versus someone younger. Like my Substack is called Permission Granted because quite often people will say to me, I feel like you gave me permission to. That permission is in you. That permission to show up just as you are with all of your grief is what I hope for everyone, that we can change the daily vernacular around. It will touch us all if it has not already. And so glad you're writing about it in your book, because I think sometimes also we can very gently see ourselves on the page in memoir, in stories of loss and grief, and just say, oh, that is exactly how I felt, or she's putting words to what I have not been able to say out loud. And suddenly you just feel, like you said, not crazy. And it can be crazy making because no one's talking about it. And we don't live near villages. You also said that. Like we no longer live in a place where the whole village knows that you've lost your father. And they're all there for you to support you. We're disparate, we're back to work, we're fast, we're in our own business. We're looking at highlight reels of people's lives on social media. And it really deserves time and space to heal. And over the course of a lifetime, not just in the first year or the first 3 or 4 days of bereavement leave that the common workplace gives you these days, but the long arc of grief. As I said, I first met it in a way that was so hard and brought me right back to when I lost my mother, when I became pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
think that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
And I was also like wondering, is there such a concept, let's say, as grieving almost too soon? Because in my family, I've had years to sort of mourn the loss when my grandparents have had dementia and my aunt has, been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. And it's a long process of losing somebody you love. Um, oh, I hope I don't tear up. And so it's almost like with my mom, I start grieving for her before she's gotten to that stage. And I tell myself I shouldn't be doing that because I'm not enjoying her as she is today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But she's changing, so it's hard not to, right?
It's
Yeah.
both. It's both. I always say it's both because along the memory loss of my father as well, I kept just trying to meet him where he was. It was almost as if I could not even remember the before as we were living in the now. And then when he died, it was almost as if I were grieving two people. It was
Mm.
like the guy I came to know and love in the memory loss, that I just kept showing up and meeting him exactly where he was. And it was only then that I got to go back and grieve the before, the wise counsel, and the guy you would call on all the occasions where you needed his approval, help, cheerleading. He was like easygoing and Midwestern, but he also used to call him the Velvet Hammer because he was also this madman and years in advertising. And he was so wise in business. And he had helped each and every one of us with all of these big life decisions. And we were then the ones, his 4 children, making these giant decisions for how best to care for him. So I just say, be in the moment. If he taught us anything, it was sort of this practice of returning to the now. And it can be sad, and you can grieve, this anticipatory grief they call it. But I think we miss what's right before us when we grieve what hasn't even happened yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's almost like, have you tried meditating and you find your mind just wandering off and then you have to bring it right back
That's
to
it.
the present, right? I think anyone who is, anticipating changes and
Yes.
Mhm.
thinking ahead. It's almost like, I feel like meditation, where you just have to bring yourself back in the moment and just, enjoy things when you can. And again, it's hard because we're all anticipating something, right? And having children, we're always worrying about their health, we're always worrying about what's happening with, so I can't imagine that it's a difficult journey, it's a difficult process, but I love that in your circles, in your memory circles, you guys also, you have people writing.
Hmm.
So we could talk about that a little bit, because
Sure.
both of us love writing, and this is such, for me it was a very important step in my grief journey. Also, when I was going through postpartum depression, I did finally meet a therapist who told me, just start writing, write everything down, write your thoughts down, and I had crazy thoughts. I mean, I remember one day my son was probably 4 months old, and he was already sleeping through the night and things were good. I wasn't good emotionally, mentally. And I remember walking into his room, looking into his closet and thinking, and again, I was not in my right mind. If I got rid of all his clothes, then I would have nothing to put on him, which means um I he would need to be here. If he didn't have any clothes, what would he wear? He'd be naked all the time. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, what was that? What the hell is going on with me? It was so irrational. My husband came
Mm.
home and I started bawling. I gave him the kid. I'm like, I can't believe these thoughts I'm having. Like, what am I thinking? Like giving him away? Obviously not. But it was so irrational that I started writing it down. So writing
Mhm.
it down, it kind of helped me look at it and go, whoa, okay, let's talk this through, right? I didn't get on medication. I probably should have. But talk about the things you have people writing down and what it is. Is there a specific topic?
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes, as we said, there isn't anyone who is a story witness, right? We have not found a way that we can express ourselves or our grief. So I, as part of what I call a grief tending practice, is that you show up to the journal as part of a practice. And what I often encourage people to put on the page is exactly what you said, sort of just like a freehand, right? Like, what are the feelings that I have on the inside? Because what we're always looking for in grief is movement. So the stuff that feels like it gets stuck and sticky, I always say that's like if you shook a snow globe and it's sort of the silt at the bottom of the snow globe. Like I always imagine that's in our bones, that's in our belly, the stuff that we don't express. So sometimes it's hard to find the right words, but when we find the page, we create safety, we create a place where we could see it outside of ourselves, so it's proof that it's movement, and then we can interrogate the thoughts, right? You see it on the page and you say to yourself, is it true? Is the
Right.
story I'm telling myself the truth? Sometimes I say to people, write the story you're telling yourself. So that's the prompt. The story I'm telling myself is. And sometimes I find people are sad that they had unresolved issues with the person who has passed or a difficult relationship. And so they feel as if they can never make amends. And I say, write to them, see what it feels like to share this expression and connect to them. Often I think that cells in our body don't know if our loved ones are earthly or otherwise. And so I feel like you can just the same as people talk out loud to loved ones and tell them what's going on. I think sometimes we need, for some of us, the page feels like that place where we can open up and share. There are many studies, including Dr. Pennebaker's expressive writing, where we know that sort of sometimes that writing right into the storm, which might feel counterintuitive, can actually release a lot of what we're holding. And so sometimes with the right guidance, I would never want anybody to do it and make themselves feel that they're unsafe. But in group, we'll have processing time. So sometimes we will have this prompt. You can share, you don't have to share, but just seeing it outside of yourself can be such a relief.
Mhm.
Um, Things that you can say on the page that feel like you said that you say to yourself or you hear in your mind's eye that feel almost unspeakable. it becomes this beautiful receptacle and safe place. Also, you can throw it away. You
Yeah.
can take it out and you can throw it away. You can, sometimes I say, you can even, some people burn their writing, some people submerge it and write in water. You can just let it dissipate. See if you could just let go. And sometimes that's guilt, sometimes that's anger, and things that are really difficult to express. Sometimes it's just the safest place for it to be. Um, Sometimes I say, write to your person, not just about your person, but to your person. Tell them what's going on. If you miss that person that used to be sort of your, witness for the minutia of the day, dear mom, if you could have seen Emma at graduation today, she graduated cum laude from BU. Remember when I used to want to go to BU? Can you believe she just, was in journalism school? And it sort of invites them into the day-to-day in a way that not only keeps their memory alive, but keeps your relationship and this continuing bond in your life so that you can remember them forward, which is one of the most special parts of getting to a point in your grief where you can reconnect with them in this new way. It will never be as good as them sitting beside you, but once we have that acceptance, not accepting that this is the way life should be, but just acceptance that they're no longer walking through the front door, which also takes a long time for our brain to make sense of. We recalibrate for a little while until we finally make sense that this person is no longer, going to walk through the front door or a holiday event or be there for a visit. And we begin to craft these rituals. And so I think of writing as ritual.
And
Right.
do you think that there's a 12-step program like how there is for alcoholics, like for grief? Like, is there like a rest? No, it's not the same.
Mhm.
Okay.
Heidi, if there were, we would all know all about it.
Yeah.
It would be amazing if there was. I remember asking that question actually. I went to a grief group and I asked that, is there steps to do, to take, to watch for, and they're like, no, it comes and goes in different steps. So denial and acceptance and crying and anger and this and that, and it will come back, right? So
Yes,
it's like
yes.
one day, because obviously in the beginning you're so angry this has happened. And for
Some
me,
some people are and
some people,
some
right?
people aren't. And
Maybe
so
not. Yeah.
the good news and bad news, I always say, is there is no right way or one way to grieve. And the
Mhm.
reason I say that that's good news is because you need to do it your very own way. And that might even be two people in the same family can lose someone and they will both grieve very differently. Children will grieve very differently than grown-ups. They'll play a little, they'll come in and remember a moment. They'll run on with their regular life and they want to go out with their friends, and then they'll suddenly find something that's a question and they're inquisitive. But it's much different. It looks so different for everyone. And the bad news is I wish there was one way. Sometimes people adapt and adopt the stages of grief, and they're nonlinear, and they were really meant for the dying. And we adapted them because we wanted stages. We thought, if I go through these 5 steps, then I will be
I'd be
cured
done.
of
Yes.
this pain. And yeah, who wants to sit in the
Yeah.
muck? But
Yeah.
I always say there's the only way is through,
Mhm.
and you will keep meeting it. I keep saying it's a long arc, because you will keep meeting it along life's trajectory. When you're ready, you will be different at 27 than you are at 37 than you are at 57. And so you keep meeting it with these life experiences and your own experiences and your own understanding as best you can at the time, right? And so early, sometimes we can't take all of it in. It's almost too much. It's overwhelming. It's shocking. It has trauma baked in, a sudden loss. No one had named that for me very early on.
Mhm.
That she was this beloved person is here one day and gone the next, and
Yeah.
your grieving brain and body can make absolutely no sense of it. You have to literally build new neural pathways to
Wow.
understand that this person, we're out there hunting for them, right? That's our,
Mhm.
we're out in the woods searching for this person who is lost,
Mhm.
and we need to make sense. And that is what I say about the idea of acceptance, right? It's not that we are accepting that this is, oh, this was meant to be, or any of those things that people try to say to make us feel better. Um, it is just the truth of what is, and the way that we meet our loss can give us the control that we need, but we will always be learning. We will always, to me, there is this longing and yearning that we satisfy in so many different ways, whether that is lighting a candle, or going to a religious service, or going to a support circle, or seeing a therapist, or drawing, or eating their favorite foods. There are so many ways that we, each and every one of us, meet our grief.
Yeah, that's so true. It's interesting because up until you're faced with it, you don't really understand what it takes, what you go through. I mean, you see people struggling when they lose someone, and you always say, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I feel like that has lost its meaning unless you go through it yourself, and then you truly understand what it means. And I remember it was so interesting, Heidi, you were talking about the steps. And I remember going through these, well, strange to me, these new steps, these new realities, these new feelings, right? At first, it was like disbelief. No, this isn't happening. This can't be happening. This doesn't happen to us. This happens to other
Other
people,
people.
but this doesn't happen to us, to me. And it was so out of my hands because I'm such I don't want to say a control freak. I hate that word, that phrase.
But a
I,
sense of control. Grief
but I
feels
like,
very out of
yes,
control.
I like knowing I'm in control, taking care of things. This is what I do. This is my culture, us Eastern Europeans, And when we're in the hospital and the doctor's like, well, your father is very ill. And I'm like, what the fuck do you mean? He went in perfectly fine. You made him ill. So I went
Mm.
off, and I was holding back because the things that I wanted to say, I was trying to hold back. My kids were there, my brother is there. And at first it was like, oh, I'm going to throw up. So there's a lot of physical
Mhm.
feelings, right, that go through. I went outside. I thought I was going to throw up. I ran into the bathroom. Then I'm like, no, fuck this. I'm going to fight this. And then the more things started to kind of come into me, I remember that night sitting in bed going, okay, well, I can't do anything about this. This is just what it is. So I have to start to accept and let go. As soon
Mm.
as I said that to myself, I thought, okay, well, I can't control everything. This is happening. And then it's like, well, what about my mom? What do I do for her? And it was, like you said, it was so many different emotions and feelings and thoughts. And you start to kind of try to weed through them or swim through them or whatever. And then it's like unpacking everything. Okay, this happened. Now what? So, and I wonder, I'm sure you see all of that too, right? At first, it's
All
like
of
a
it.
barrage of all of it.
It is so different for each and every person. I think what we think we know is
Mhm.
are the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages of grief, because we want some recipe. We want
Mm.
some, just like you said, we want some steps. We want a program. We want to know. And she sat with folks who were terminally ill, and she came up with those stages because she noticed that in their acceptance of their death, they came to acceptance through all of those stages. And so while we touch those for certain during our grief experience, they are like the most non-linear tangle, and some may touch only anger, and some may be in denial for a very, very long time. But how we meet, that's what I always say. Claire Bidwell Smith, who I've studied with and is a mentor, she calls this conscious grieving. So while we don't have control over what happened to us, we didn't invite the grief, whatever it is, the way we meet it is what we have control over.
Mm.
So how you choose to craft on purpose and with purpose grief tending practice, and it is a practice, just like meditation, just like yoga, that we show up to it and we meet it. And it can happen all different ways, one of which is writing, and a grief circle, which you've also been with me. But it's different for everybody. For some, going to the ritual of going and visiting the graveside is very important to them. That's not that's not where my mother lives. That's not where
Mhm.
my father lives.
So for
In my
you, that doesn't.
doesn't bring me solace. For
Oh,
others, it is.
mhm,
I have clients who bring minion balloons and decorate on birthdays, and like folks who order cakes and sit on a picnic blanket, and they're all so beautiful and so welcome and so right if they are right for you.
mhm,
And
mhm.
we're always looking for the right way. I think it's
Always. I think it's human nature, right? Where our brain is always trying to make sense of things. And like we were just talking about not too long ago, I've read a lot of things about the brain and the rewiring, which is very possible. It's possible to rewire the way we think, because I was just telling my kids that as I left them, in Hawaii to do their thing and live and study and fly helicopters and ride motorcycles. And we won't go into that though. I kept telling them, your brain can always learn new things. You can always rewire the way you think. So, like for example, my youngest, he overthinks everything, and not only overthinks, but he is always wondering, what does it look like to people? Am I doing the right thing? Am I being a good person? Am I helping others?
Mm.
Or if I quit this job because I'm exhausted and I shouldn't have this 10-hour nursing job at a vet hospital while I'm studying to fly helicopters, they're gonna hate me. I'm gonna look like a jackass. And I keep telling him that, if you just pivot the way you look at things, your brain will catch up, because our brain always goes to the negative first. It creates scenarios that are not really there, right? Studies have been done that we automatically go to the worst case scenario. And I think they came up with that 83% of the time, those scenarios don't actually happen in life. So everything we create, right? I remember I need to find the article, it was fascinating. And when he heard that, he was like, oh, okay. So it's fascinating that our brain is capable of not only change, but completely rewiring the way we look at things. Same with
And
grief.
yes, same with grief. So, one of the leaders in the field, Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor, writes The Grieving Brain. That was her first book. And she talks all about what happens. She talks about brain fog. She talks about all kinds of neurological changes that happen in the brain to help us make sense
Mm,
of just that, of where have they gone, where has our person
mm,
gone. And then she wrote The Grieving Body, which just came out this last year, and
mm.
she talks about the reality of broken heart syndrome and like these
Oh,
things that illnesses and things that happen in our body that are undeniable. And folks like Nicole Sachs, who writes Mind Your Body, and
mhm.
talks about chronic pain showing up when we have experienced chronic pain and chronic anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. This is so interesting. I have so much to say because,
Go.
like, first of all, when you mentioned broken heart syndrome, that's exactly what my main character thinks her mother died from, because her
Mm,
father abandoned the family and she never got over the fact, whatever, and it wasn't a genetic issue. But yeah, I find that so fascinating. And it kind of ties into the chronic illness, because I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, and a lot of that is it's all in the brain basically, because physically there isn't anything wrong with you, and yet you actually do feel that pain. And it's very similar to, they say, when somebody loses a limb, and it's like that
yes.
phantom pain, and it's real and yet it isn't real at the same time.
Yeah, she talks about it's a brilliant book for all of us to read, to really understand. It's called Mind Your Body by Nicole
Mhm.
Sachs.
Okay.
And you will love this practice that she has, Heidi. It's called Journal Speak. And she explains that the pain is your nervous system just showing up to tell you And this doesn't mean you don't go to the doctor. This means you go to the doctor. Yeah.
Oh,
You,
right.
go to the doctor.
Yeah.
You also read this to understand how the body is processing. So she talks about, it's sort of like putting water on the fire alarm instead of the fire. The
Mhm.
fire alarm is what's telling you what's wrong in the body, right? It's sort of like,
Exactly.
I'm going to show up as this pain, so you slow down and take
Mhm.
care of whatever this underlying symptom is. And I'm
Yes.
showing you this pain. It's kind of like your your reservoir is full and you
Mhm.
can't take any more. And so I'm going to show up as this pain. Your nervous system is like, I'm waving the flag. Are you listening? Are you
Exactly.
listening?
Right.
And it is, once you understand sort of like what's under the hood of some of the ways in which we sit with suffering, right?
Mhm.
And that is not to say that I grief, uh, tears get a bad rap. People, first thing they come in group, and I heard you say it when you started to get teary, is I'm sorry. Like we
Mhm.
apologize, because it feels sort of that control issue again. It feels sort of out of control, or people feel like they're going to start crying and they're never going to stop.
Mm.
Um, Ellen Vora wrote a book, Dr. Ellen Vora, about anxiety, and she's like, we need to take tears to a 10, to an 11. Like, let them rip. Let yourself move all the way through the beginning, middle, and the end of an emotion so that we can ride it out and let it move, just like I was talking about writing as movement, and let it move through the body.
Yes. I
Yeah.
think there's actually like a physiological response I heard that
Mhm.
Yes,
brain, it's physically healing and it
it
calms you down. It releases that stress.
it does.
Yeah.
It does. And that's what we that's why we try on all of the modalities that we have at our disposal, and we see, what does my grief tending practice look like? Is it
Mhm.
running? Is it writing? Is it talk therapy? Is it
Going to
um,
a medium.
yeah, is it equine therapy? Is it connecting with a loved one through a medium, and knowing that they are okay and safe, and
Right.
that brings us calm? And there are
So much.
endless, countless
Yeah.
ways that we can not only remember them and create this relationship, but find who we are too on this
Right.
side, this identity shift. And if someone had told me that there would be post-traumatic growth in my life, now I don't wish for any of the grief that came my way to have happened, but because it is here, what I have made of it and the way that I live my life is, to me, extraordinary.
Well, I mean, look how many people you're helping. You created
Oh,
something out of such struggle, out of such pain. And the fact that you are here to help others now, it's incredible. It's almost
oh,
like when I remember people telling me this, when I was going through postpartum and just raising a baby at 23. What did I know about it? On my own, without a village. My parents worked. My husband had to go back to work, and I decided not to. And I was there, and I was alone, completely alone, except for a few friends here and there. None of my friends were having children at 23. They were still out partying and having fun. And I remember a neighbor who was a little bit older than me that said, you know what, you're going to get to a point that you're going to become the expert and everything, baby. And then you're going to be telling others it's okay to let them cry or do this or try this. And I thought, never. I'm never going to. How can I? I don't know what I'm doing. And he's crying. And why is he crying? And I change him and this and that. And then the same thing happened in my grief journey too. I thought
mhm.
I'm never going to get to that point where I might be able to give someone a bit of help, advice. And
Yes.
this is what you're doing now. You've become that person on the other side. You came through, and I think it's incredible. We need so many of these support groups, not just support groups, but people that, because there's so many crappy support groups. I'm sorry.
I agree.
Come on.
I'm giving you absolute permission to come and go if it doesn't feel right.
Right.
You
But
know,
you
trust
but the
yourself.
the way you lead them and the way, I mean, obviously people keep coming back and back and, over and over again, because to lighten it up a little, I have gone to some of these places where it was for postpartum depression support group or grief groups, where I'm sitting there like, what am I listening to? What is happening? Who's in charge
Who's
here?
in charge here?
And I wanted to jump in and go, hey, you, shut the fuck up. Enough. Yes, you're grieving, but I don't want to hear about your mom's ingrown toenails before she died. Somebody jump in.
Wow.
Somebody
Yeah.
take control of this group.
Yeah, it is. And there are wonderful places, but just trust your instincts. Like,
Yes.
people often ask me what I do, and I get like such a funny, like, oh, like, aren't you sad all the time? And so sometimes I joke and I say I'm a hope dealer, that I show people all these decades later that you can make meaning, that you can have these incredible rituals. You could still be sad on
It's
the
possible.
30-year anniversary.
Right.
You can, I it's not that I'm even like such a forward facing, showing my journey, but I don't hide what I've been through. I write about it very openly. And like I said, I have felt making sense of a lot of things without my mother was me writing about it and trying to make sense of it on paper, and then realizing maybe that will help just one other person. That was my whole reason for being. Maybe that will help just one person. I wrote an essay in the book that Heidi and I met on
I'm being
being Jewish,
Jewish now. Yeah,
and
it's
it was
behind me there. Yeah.
yeah, and it was all about my dad, and it really was about him growing up without his dad. He lost his dad when he was 7, and how he taught me about the ritual of honoring our losses over time, and that there was once this incredible rabbi when we stood for services and we were honoring our grief, me for my mother and him for his father. And as we're standing, the rabbi said, "Do you know why you stand?" And my whole younger life, I had always thought no one had told me. So I thought, oh, maybe to be closer to God or whatever you believe, or to our loved ones, where I believed they were when I was in an airplane, where the clouds meet the forever, like in that little horizon line.
Right.
And he said, it is so that others in the community can see that you are grieving and that you may need their help and
Yeah.
support.
I remember reading that and I teared up. I thought, what a beautiful explanation. And I never knew that either. Like how you wrote, like, you're not alone.
You're
You're
not
in a
alone.
community and everyone's grieving with you. And that so resonated, especially since October 7th. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but I just thought that was so beautiful what your rabbi
Yeah.
said.
I
Yeah.
agree. And I just want to ask you one thing and then would love to get your, you know, uh, the most important piece of advice that you can give someone. But I guess one of my questions to you is, and I'm sure you hear about this all the time during your grief groups, the meetings, and what if you have accepted and you've worked through things and you're doing all right, obviously it's up and down and you have good days and bad days, but when you're around a particular person, all you can do is think about grief and their grief, and it puts you backwards. It
Mhm.
makes you think about it more, makes you depressed, it makes you, and yet it's, maybe a family member or someone you cannot avoid in life.
Hmm.
And no matter what you do, you automatically go to that place and you go to
Hmm.
that worst place that day that it happened. What do you suggest people to do? And obviously, I'm asking for me, but I'm
Yeah,
sure there's other people. I'm not going to name names, but there's got to be a way to deal with that, right? Where you
sure.
feel like you're okay and you're getting there and you've done the work, but that person hasn't, and it brings you down and brings everyone else down.
It sounds also very empathic, right? Like when we're with someone else who's experienced a loss and we're feeling people, we can often feel their loss. And I think we have to imagine almost that if you could have a string connected to that person, imagine in your mind's eye that you could just snip that string and just send it back to the person. That is not my grief. That is not my experience. I can hold love and space for them, but that is not mine. I'm just going to tenderly send it back to you and see if you can make that a practice. It's almost a visualization. You can lay in bed at night and do that. Sometimes I do that. It's something that I learned long ago from Claire when we were holding, retreats for 30 people and hearing stories. You have to, people often ask me, what are your practices? And so sometimes that's ways of moving energy that I am holding on behalf of others. And so it can be acupuncture, it can be yoga, it can be like, what ways can we find not just ways of moving the grief through us, but the energy of others' emotions that are around us? That can happen in the workplace too, right? So we have to think about, what does my well-being look like? And maybe there's also a reframe. Is there something that you can remember? I'm never going to tell someone to, I'm not like put a crystal on it. I'm not like bright siding your experience, but sometimes I think I can sit in the most dire day of hospital and what they look like, and that can be recurring, and that's hard, and that is what a lot of people come with me. And slowly I say, could you look at pictures of beautiful times that you've had together? Could you enjoy a favorite meal? Could you listen to a playlist full of their favorite music? Could you go somewhere that they always dreamed of going and enjoy the awe and beauty of that site? Sometimes I bring my mom's purse with me to theater because she loved theater, and I put all the tickets to the shows in there, and it's like, come on, Ellen, we're going to a show. And tell stories. I think also you could tell beautiful stories. What do you remember that's not from that day? What beautiful story, what beautiful memory can you recall? And like I said, this isn't a bright side. Sometimes we need to be in the muck. Sometimes we need to be in it in order to like really feel it and be with it and cry to an 11 and sob. I remember my mother taking, my grandma's last frozen soup from the freezer after she lost my grandma, and just like sitting in a heap of tears at the dining table with frozen soup, because it was the last quart. It was the last taste. It was the last, it was it. And we know on my mom's last day, she had a receipt for 3 pounds of Santa Rosa plums, her favorite, only in the summer, deep dark in the inside, rich ruby red on the inside. And I'll often have a plum. So I think find those moments that feel like you can celebrate your person in a way that feels true to you, and release yourself from the grief that others are expressing or feeling. They may be stuck, but you don't have to be stuck with them.
That's so powerful. I love that. And something I do, I don't know if other people do this too, but I wear the jewelry I inherited. So I'll be like, hey, Safta, look, we're going to, exactly like what you said. I'll, go get my nails done, because she loved getting her nails done.
Yeah.
With me, and I'm going to bring Granny. So I'm going to have, so it's a way to like keep people with you.
Yeah. I just took my dad's tie tack. My brother wore it to his funeral, and I'm the eldest. So I said to him, hey, where'd you get that? He goes, I don't know. It was in Dad's jewelry box. And I said, do you want to keep it? He's like, no, I just thought it would be nice if I wore it today. So I said, all right, give it to me.
Nice.
And I made it into a signet ring. And so I just placed it. Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
At the very top, and it has his initials, and it makes me so happy. And I feel like it's when that's with me, it's sort of like, a little superpower.
A little piece of them. Yeah. That's so interesting, because my mother-in-law, it was the first time I've heard of someone doing that. I remember she, like, to my wedding, she wore her mom's, and she's lost so much in her life. Her mom died pretty young. her sister died, in her 40s, early 40s from cancer. And so she's had a lot of loss. And I remember seeing a new ring that she was wearing, and there was something else she was wearing. I was like, oh, what is that? She's like, oh, that was my mom's. And I put it on and I wear these things, and it makes me feel like they're with me, my sister,
Yes.
mom, grandma, whoever it was. And I thought that was so beautiful. And that's why I remember I took my dad's he has a, I don't have it on today, but it's a Jewish star pendant that we brought, one of the only things we brought over with us from Soviet Union. He never wore it, because he was very, very much minimalist, but I stole it from him. I remember I borrowed and never borrowed it back. And he was like, I was looking in mom's jewelry box, and my, Magen David thing that we brought over is missing. I'm assuming you took it because yeah, I do. And now I wear it all the time, and it makes me, and I'll touch it throughout the day, and it'll make me feel like, he's with me. And I remember my kids were saying, like, because it's a big piece, like it's big, not as big as Heidi's right there.
Yeah,
That one.
I love the one you gave me. I
So
love it.
beautiful.
But it's close. And now that I tinker with jewelry, that has become such a thing after he's passed. I take broken jewelry and I make it into new stuff. And that's one of the things I've noticed that I wanted to do more. And I want to almost like submerge myself in it, but he's a man, so he didn't have a lot of jewelry. But I have his watch and I keep it in the lining of my purse with me. And you're right. Whatever it is, you need to find that thing that makes you feel
Connected.
good,
Yeah.
connected.
Makes you feel
Yes.
good. It makes you feel connected. It
Yeah.
and it can be ritual. For some people it's like a golf tournament, or it's using the clubs, and for others it's jewelry. Whatever makes you feel close, whatever brings you comfort, whatever brings you peace. Some people have an altar in their house. They have little space where they keep some of the, beautiful belongings, or they make a mandala in nature, or they go on a walk and they think about them while on the walk. There are so very many ways to remember. I think also we have to keep telling their stories. My mother never knew my kids. She died before I had children, and she was never a grandma. And I took the liberty of calling her Grandma Ellen. And when I told my girls stories about her, I would say, we would get home maybe too late to take like a full bath. And my mom used to do like a washcloth and a soap, and we would do that real fast. So I told my girls, this is a Grandma Ellen bath. And we would do the, quick. I said, no time for tonight, but we're just going to do a Grandma Ellen bath, or this was Grandma Ellen's favorite, and so I would incorporate that. The greatest gift that people have given me is to say that through my stories, my girls included, they feel as if they know my mom, and the same with my father, that along our journey of caretaking, that when I would share what we were doing with my dad, people would say to me, what a beautiful caretaker you were. He must have been so loved. We can tell about, it was just so lovely in reflection. So do remember, not just as grievers, but those supporting grievers, ask the name of their loved one. Because sometimes we could say, I used to say real fast, like, my mom died when I was young. And then I started to say, my mom, Ellen. And it opens up.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
it opens up so many conversations. She becomes a person in the room. I have also ordered takeout and also my drinks with her name or my dad's name now. And so sometimes I just love that. Like, especially it gives me a giggle. Like, I was with my girls and we ordered bubble tea, and I was like, this is hilarious. Ellen, like they call my mom, and it's this like bright pink thing with like, bubble
I love
tea.
that.
But just your takeout orders, just like small winks and nods where you just become more comfortable being with their memory in a way that feels like you're bringing them into the everyday. But do ask their name and show up. Sometimes we don't know what to do, and so we do nothing. And I say, show up as your truest self. The cooks. I always say to people, the cook cooks. So if you're great at cooking, show up like that. I say, nobody wants me to cook for them. I'm the girl.
Here.
I'm the girl that can like sit with you and really just just be in the listening, or just be in the muck, or be with your tears. Like, I'm really the one that was like, okay to hold that kind of space. And then there are the people that remind you that there's life after loss. Maybe they're the ones that show up to take you to a show, or to take you to a party, or to remind you that, you're going to continue to go on those walks that you did in the neighborhood. I'm going to keep knocking, I'm going to keep asking, I'm going to
Yeah.
keep texting you. I'm going to say no reply necessary, but we're going to go on a walk at 11, and if you'd like to join, I'll be by the front door. Just keep showing up as your truest you. They need you long after the first year and the second year.
Right. I think that's so important. And you know what? One other thing that I learned through my process, my grief journey, is that I wasn't the right friend to someone who lost their partner.
Mm.
And it was a good friend of mine. We kind of raised our kids together for a while until she moved away to another state, but she lost her husband at a very young age. I mean, I want to say he was like, mid 40s. He had cancer. And when I went to the memorial, and I was a wreck. I was a wreck, and it was not helpful to her. I was crying, I was bawling, I kept, hugging her, and just telling her I was sad. And looking back now, obviously I didn't know how to deal with it. So I was being myself, but it was not the right kind of, you know,
Well, sometimes a loss will happen to someone, and the first thing that it does is it touches our own mortality, or it really shows us, like you said earlier, other people are us.
yeah,
And when it comes so close to home, the idea of losing your spouse or losing a child, it can sometimes be our greatest fear, and it is so close
right.
that we do just fall apart, because we are suddenly imagining ourselves in their shoes, and it is hard.
Yeah.
And I just recently reached out to someone I grew up with in elementary school. We were all reunited, and we did a couple Zooms together. And I felt the need to write her. She had lost her mom when we were in elementary school. And
Mhm.
I said, knowing what I know now, I wish we and our parents had been better to
Mm,
you and your dad. I wish we had known what I know now. And I'm
been there.
sorry. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry. She said, it's the most beautiful thing that anyone has ever said to me. So it's also never too late.
Yeah. And I did exactly that. I sent
Mm,
her an email, and I apologized, and she said, "Don't even feel bad about it. I completely understand. We all, we're human, like you said, and things happen." And but I remember telling my husband, I feel awful for the way that I took it. It was almost like it was my grief,
mhm.
but yeah, I lost it. I didn't know how. And I just imagined her with her four kids, without him. And but I acknowledged it. I apologized, and I told her, I it is what it is, and she accepted it, and she was
Mm.
grateful, but
We're human, and
yeah,
you can go back, and you can say you're sorry, and you can write a condolence card even if it's been a year, and
yeah.
you just, that was also an understanding later, right? But
Mm,
immediately we think, oh, that could be us. How many times have we seen life in the news, and it looks like it's happening to other people, and then one day those other people are us, and we can't know until we know,
right,
right? And
right.
so we do our best. We do our best, and it is a
Yes.
beautiful thing to just be a friend. And like
Reach
I
out.
said, at any time to reach out, to just say, I'm going to pick the kids up. I'm going to take the garbage out. I'm going to send my kid over to walk your dog. I'm going to walk your dog, like whatever it is. And it could be thoughtful. It could be a poetry book. It could be a small gesture. It could be writing the anniversary of the loss on your calendar and
Mm,
remembering it year in and year out. It can be so beautiful, even if it's just a text check-in. I know tomorrow is going to be hard for you. Would you like to go grab a coffee?
Wow. That's
Thinking of you. there are so many small but incredibly big. To just know that someone is out there thinking of you
Yeah.
is
Mhm.
and your loved one,
What a
right?
good I'm so gonna do that because my best friend was murdered, by her husband a couple years ago, so it was also
Mhm.
she's still
Mm.
dealing with that, so I'm gonna put that on my calendar, and I'm gonna do that, so you
And we can
so
feel that when we're
yeah.
coming up to an anniversary, sometimes we don't even realize that we'll be feeling sluggish, we'll be feeling sad, we'll be like we'll almost forget. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh well, of course, this is the month that that happened, or this is when I got the phone call that the test results came, and this is when we found out that he had mild cognitive impairment and we were in for this dementia journey, or we didn't even know, but we know now. And we realize we're sort of in our season of grief. I have a colleague and friend, Marissa Renee Lee, who calls all her loss came in February. She calls it "fuck you February," and
Uh,
all of her friends that extended, like everybody knows, like
Yeah.
February is just the pits. And so, sometimes we just have our seasons and our reasons, and when we
that
know
makes
that
sense.
yeah, when we know that someone is out there just remembering alongside us, I think it's
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
lovely.
and February, same for me.
I know, it was in
Actually,
February. Aw.
on leap day, which
Ah,
that was the one of the first thoughts in my head. Oh my God, we can never do the Yazrit, because it doesn't exist next year, and it doesn't exist next year, the year after.
ah,
And I remember telling the rabbi our Chabad rabbi who came to the hospital, and he was like, "That's okay. Pick a
yeah,
day because it does
pick a day.
exist."
Yeah,
Or maybe even to look at it like, okay, well, he's up there and he's doing his thing, and we shouldn't be memorializing like the tragedy. Just think about him and still light a candle and still do the prayer and still the whole thing. It could be the day before, it could be the day after. But in my head, I was like, I can't make sense of this. This day does
yes.
not exist. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And it was so confusing. And it just,
Heidi,
he's
that's a good plot line for a
Yeah,
book. Yeah.
I'm always thinking, "I'm gonna use it, Julia."
okay. I know, right? Somebody should write a book about that. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but well, I mean, first of all, I love talking to you, every time we've talked. And I think this is such a moving topic that people do not talk about enough, especially in this country. It's a very different reaction when I would tell like my Eastern European people about my dad's passing. The reaction, the support, everything, it's very different. And I think in America, like you said, if you don't acknowledge it, it's like out of sight, out of mind. We don't know what to say, might as well say nothing.
Right.
No, that's not how it should be. So
Remind me Dad's name.
and you asked me that was the most beautiful thing. It's Vladimir. So
Vladimir.
when you're talking about your Starbucks order or pick up to go order, I'm thinking I'm gonna try that, but they're gonna look weird at me. What is it? Vladimir. What is it? Vlad, and so, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do Vlad
Yeah.
or something.
Vlad, your double espresso is ready.
Yeah, no, but like here I
Here
am.
I am.
Yeah.
It is so happy. And I post things like that on Instagram because I think here's an idea. It's not very hard. It's a sweet thing. And so many people have done it now. I have folks that are not Jewish that have been in all of my circles. I've posted a memorial candle. They're like, "Where do you get that?" And I tell them
Mhm.
that it's in the supermarket and it
Yeah.
burns for 24 hours. And even if it's not your religion, they're like, "Really? I can do that?" I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
you have my permission."
Yeah.
But if you don't have a tradition, you can most definitely borrow one. And my website is full of
Mhm.
ritual and reflections and conversations that are brave, like this one that we've had. I'm so grateful to both of you for opening up. I know you've experienced loss and written about loss, and it takes these kinds of conversations so that we can become a lighthouse for others, that we can shine a
Mhm.
light on this. It's not taboo. It's going to come for all of us if it hasn't already, and that's not a threat. It's human. It's like birthdays. It's we all have an end, and if we can make it beautiful, and we can reflect on the beauty of what remains,
Yeah.
so be it.
Yeah, this was so nice having you here. We've done a lot of podcasts, but I have to say, I feel like this one especially has been so magical, so
Oh,
healing, so informative. So
Yeah.
I loved talking with you.
And important, yeah, very important conversations that people should be having. And you do, I want to mention, you do have a retreat coming up in the
I do.
Berkshires,
I
uh
do. It's at
Denver.
Yeah, it's in September 14 to 17, and it's a magical place, Kripalu. And I think when you take time, to just dedicate yourself to these, not just a grief group, but maybe a grief journey that takes place on outside of your day-to-day
Yeah,
life on a retreat, you can
away from
really,
your house and your
yeah,
death and your little, it's like you're in a cocoon, you balloon,
yes,
you take
yes.
it somewhere else.
It's beautiful. It's so healing, and it's really for you and about you and some dedicated time and space. And some people do it on an anniversary. Some people do it when they're just good and ready to sort of let go and let be. And there's so much nurturance there. All the food is prepared, and
I love
it's
that.
in the
I'm going to push my mom to do it because it's right around their anniversary, and it would have been
Oh,
their 50th anniversary,
oh
September
wow.
10th. So it's
wow.
Oh my god,
so
that's my birthday.
yeah.
That's your parents' anniversary?
Yes. Yeah, and it
Oh,
would have been 50 years this year. So I'm going to highly encourage her to go because she needs this so badly. And I think it would be amazing. So for any of you listeners, that want to check it out, people can still sign up, right?
yeah.
There's still spots. So the memorycircle.com is the website. Everything is going to be in the show notes. We are so happy you could join us. I'm so happy you found me. Thank you, Heidi, for introducing me. Thank you for being here, and we can't wait to talk to you again. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share. And even if you didn't enjoy it, share anyway. Thank you for listening, and come back to Someone Had to Say It.